Hello, and so like I said earlier in your first video of this module, a lot of these resources are actually not directly from poetry, but work really well in poetry. And this example is actually talking about travel and nature writing in creative nonfiction, which is a branch of nonfiction that essentially tells true stories about ourselves, but stylized like fiction. So we're talking about place and space and setting in these types of essays, but everything we're learning here can be used in poems about places as well. And there's a lot of really interesting themes that go along with this type of writing, so I wanted to help you explore those too. So generally, the two different ways we address setting in writing is either to travel to a new place or to describe a place that we might be familiar with. So travel essays focus on that aspect of going somewhere new. Travel, however, does not have to be expensive or far. You can travel as far as outside of your neighborhood for the first time. You can travel to a new area of the city that you just haven't been to. This doesn't require a lot of money or experience, and you can also travel extremely far. Sometimes we find really interesting spaces in places we are least expecting. So travel can also focus on a variety of the senses, which is really awesome about this particular kind of writing. But what we're doing is not focusing necessarily on a summary of what happens, right? And especially even in creative nonfiction, but especially in poetry, we don't want this to just be a summary of events. We want to evoke images and emotions. And so how we would use the idea of travel in our poetry is to focus on the strong emotional connections to places, new or old, positive or negative. You don't even have to like the natural world in order to do a good travel or nature poem. Though there are some aspects of travel that need to ring true. First of all, experience of the five senses. You want to try to get in as many sensory details about travel as you can, because think about what's most important when you travel, when you experience something new. For some of you, it might be like shopping and just seeing what kind of stuff is available in the area. For me, it's food. I like to eat my way through a city, just demolish everything in sight until I can no longer move and must be rolled back to my hotel. Because food is a very evocative thing for me. I enjoy the smells of it, the culture of it, the tastes of it. It gets a lot of senses in there. It's also visual, the way it's presented on the plate. It involves a lot of sounds of the kitchens and the people cooking and like the amount of crowd in a restaurant. So it's very sensory kind of experience. But there are also sensory details related to travel and just kind of how a place sounds or how crowded a place feels, how warm it is. There's a bunch of different things you can notice about setting. The first time I was in, the only time I was in London, the sun was setting at like 3 p.m. and it was so strange, and it wasn't something I ever would have thought of. When I was in Maine for the first time, the sun was rising at 4 in the morning, also wildly unexpected. And so these, like the changing sensations of how places exist and what we expect out of them is really interesting components of travel. One thing you do want to focus on is how a place defies common expectations. So if you're writing about a place you have traveled to or want to travel to, then you want to talk about expectations and how they are either met or defied. But also travel includes elements of ritual. So what is normal for this place? Especially if you're focusing on somewhere you've either never been or want to go or just going for the first time. If you are new, you have the element of your speaker being a foreigner or an outsider, and we want to explore that. If this is not home, who is this home for and what do they do? Just like what kinds of experiences are normal. I got the opportunity to go to St. Petersburg, Russia, and normal for them was like an entire community getting together and watching the light show on a bunch of drawbridges. And it was so strange for me. And it was very different. And so like exploring that ritual and what it means to those people could be a really cool way to talk about place. So also going into this includes ideas of culture shock, discovery, danger, unfamiliarity, the loss of identity of being alone somewhere new or being an outsider. Those are all really important themes to consider when going into any kind of travel writing. So if travel is more up your alley, those are themes you can explore. This is a list of details you might look into. But then we also have, I have a couple of examples of travel essays if you're interested in them, but that's not really what we're looking at here. We also have nature writing, and nature writing is a little bit different because it's not focused on the transportation of self to place or from one place to another. It's about a place that exists and we are exploring it as an individual. The difference between travel and nature is that generally we're looking at nature as an isolated place, sure, but we're also focusing on the ways that setting can become a character or can have a personality or a quality about it that feels human. So when we describe a place, we often personify it. We describe it as welcoming or scary or maybe even like a really happy place. We often give human words to non-human places because they make sense for us in some kind of way. So nature, when you're focusing on just nature and not on travel, you are focusing on the human connection with the outside world, whether it's natural or man-made, and some kind of effect that the place has on the person. It's usually about how place can help us go through some kind of self-discovery. So what do we learn about ourselves by being in these places? And to get back to that first video, that was actually why I ended up getting this tattoo. My thesis director, when I was writing my poetry in grad school, told me that I needed to find my place of memory, the place I call home and the place where my mind goes to write, and to make it a part of myself. Now, my thesis director did after the fact state that he did not mean that literally and I was not meant to get a tattoo, but I did, so fight me. But natural writing in general, when we focus on nature in a poem, you're going to notice that this often takes on a spiritual quality in a certain kind of way. And this doesn't have to be religious. It's spiritual in the form of like strong wordless connections we have with place. Like the barrier between the human and the animal gets broken. We notice ways that humans either blend into a natural landscape or feel very much disconnected from it. We talk about things like human nature, whether or not we like or dislike these natural spaces and why. It might include themes of preservation and conservation and keeping our world alive, which is not only very important right now, but also a very popular term to kind of explore. And often nature writing takes on like the tone of an elegy being a poem that is written for something that is dead or is dying, usually people, but we can also write elegies for dead worlds or dying places or elements of things we've lost in our natural landscapes. And these might even not be elements we like. I can remember, as long as I've existed in Florida, banana spiders, awful, horrible orb weavers that they are. They have little like skulls on their back. If you've never seen a banana spider, Google it. Those things can hiss and you can hear them. They can spit like up to 3 feet. And granted, it's like poison, but like unless you have like a giant open wound, it's not going to poison you. But still, and their webs have these little zigzaggy things in them, and they're thick webs. It's awful to touch them. They don't go away. And as a small girl who grew up in Miami for 8 years and then moved to Ocala in the middle of the national forest, this was a problem for me because the banana spiders that were living in Ocala when I was a kid were like the size of dinner plates. They were this enormous, just awful, spindly things, and I had lots of fears of spiders growing up that I've been working on, and we're okay now, mostly. But I do have some very strange feelings about banana spiders because as our climate has started to change, I've noticed that not just banana spiders, but a lot of insects and reptiles have gotten much smaller. And it's odd that I feel a sense of loss for something that for so long I avoided, but it's very strange to me to only see like really small banana spiders these days. So there might even be a way for me to explore that feeling of the loss of, these horrifying creatures in a poem about place and what that place feels like and what it's meant to feel like. And so, I mean, exploring the connection between nature and the writer is the focus of these. I do also have a couple of suggested essays on nature if you would like any, but this week's poems are going to explore travel and nature as well. So these are going to be options you can consider for kind of focusing in on your themes of your poem this week and kind of digging into like maybe specific elements that you want to explore. So I hope this helps take some of the generation that we've done through that guided writing process that we did and just thinking about places in general and looking up toponyms and new words for things we may not have been able to name before. Hopefully just having all of this stuff gives you a little bit of guidance in how to go through the poem this week. But it is definitely the least form-driven week we've had so far. We're really just focusing on a topic here. So go nuts. If you want to imitate something, by all means. If you would like a prompt, I'm going to include a couple over in your exercise so that you have something to start with if you would like it. And if not, go to town with setting and place and space and travel and nature and see what happens. Good luck, and I can't wait to read them.